The question for me, Catch, is because let me just add, if you view it out of 7-5 or 8-4, right, and you're somewhere in that range, right? And I say 7-5 now. Like I'll probably increase to 8-4 as the season goes along. There'll be some Kool-Aid guys. So I'm giving myself a 1-win margin of error.
You're telling yourself there's no way you go above 8-4.
Correct. So that's why I'm starting 7-5, and so I know I'll increase to 8-4, right? I'll give myself some wiggle room so I don't go 9-3 and really put myself out there, right? But the question really becomes, if you're 7-5 or 8-4, how does it? I think it's how it looks plays a part, right? I think if you're saying it's 7-5 and you played nothing but upperclassmen, right? I think it's a little bit more of it's a disappointment at that point. I think if it's 7-5, 8-4, with a lot of young people on the field, with the Quinn Ewers on the field, with, potentially, if Campbell comes in here and Banks, maybe you have to start 2 of those guys, like, maybe get a couple of defensive guys in that rotation. Then to me, at that point, you're saying, all right, well, it may have been 7-5, 8-4, but we were learning. But if you just went all chips in, like, think about what the conversation was from Sam's last year. It was, wow, they had all these guys, all these veteran guys, and this is what they finished with. Like, think of how disappointing that was, as opposed to, I think the narrative changes a little bit more, Catch, if you go young and say, we're going to take our lumps, and you don't even say it, but when you go young, we understand it. Like, we understand that's what it is. And if he's still, and look, and Sarkisian talked about essentially, hey, this roster wasn't constructed the way that he would have constructed it. And so now, and then he talked about the excitement of being able to add in over 30 people. Like, to me, I'm like, all right, well, then this 2022 becomes that rebuilding year. Then if you're going to rebuild, go young. And that's what I'll take.
I think you and I it's all about proper expectations. I think that we're going to have so many conversations over the course of the next 8 months about the value of a 7-5 season. It's so average, but because it's better than last year, it's improvement. Mm-hmm. And it could be improvement with young guys, but while you were talking, I was in my head playing a game of, if they go 7-5, how do you want that 7-5 to break down? Do you want to go on a winning streak at the end of the season, like start off 3-4 and then run the table, and then suddenly, you end the season with like nobody wants to play you? But if you do that, like, how much damage? God, imagine Orange Bloods if at the end of Oklahoma or the middle of October, the team is 500 or below 500. Like, I'm trying to figure it out. Like, what do you want to go through a season where every other week you win and lose and you just don't know what you're going to get, but maybe there's some highs mixed in with some lows? I think by the end of answering the question, I think it comes down to, in your 7-5, who did you beat? Because Texas A&M went 8-4 this year. And to be quite honest, it was a really disappointing season on the surface, because that was a team that was expected. They were telling themselves they were going to compete for a national championship. And then they lose their projected starting quarterback for the entire year in the second week of the season, whenever that Colorado game was. And then they end up going 8-4. But one of the wins was against Alabama, and it changes the way that entire year is perceived. Like, A&M fans are still walking around with their chest bowed out, justifiably so or not. Like, I don't know that it's deserved, but I also don't know that it matters. That's how they feel. What has to be baked into a 7-5 or 8-4 season beyond the obvious of beating Oklahoma? I mean, that's you do that. And it does count as a couple of wins.
Especially with first-year coach.
So what do we think 7-5 has to look like in order for this time next year us to not be talking about a 7-5 season and Sarkisian's job being in jeopardy going into year 3.
Well, I mean, you've got to get at least one against Baylor, Oklahoma State, right? I mean,
You have to. You can't lose all 3 of those games.
Yeah. So you've got to be able to get one of those, and then maybe a K-State, game, and which is kind of your quality win. Like when you talk about, because I don't know if we would look at Iowa State knowing all that they lost or losing, and we would say, you got Iowa State. Now we can't ever knock Iowa State, obviously, because Campbell does a good job. But those are some of my initial things as far as statement wins, because there are other teams on here you look and say, all right, that you should check those boxes. So I'm thinking you've got to split between Oklahoma and Oklahoma State, and then if you get an OU win, basically with the K-State, then you have some quality wins on the schedule.
OU's the only one that moves the needle other than Alabama. I mean,
well, sure. Yes.
Right. And we're not having, nobody go into the comments section and suggest that Anwar and I said anything about Texas beating Alabama. That certainly is not happening. But on the schedule next year, there'll be 2 games that matter. It'll be fascinating to see what OU is next year. I mean, we still don't know. They'll have their own. There's a part of me that wants to hold up Oklahoma and Brent Venables' first year success with Steve Sarkisian's second year success as some sort of apple to apple thing. And it's not. I mean, he's taking over a program that until this year had won 6 consecutive Big 12 championships. But man, I think the thing that it's weird. Sarkisian, where would we rank Sarkisian? This is its own YouTube show. So this is just a quick answer.
Okay.
Where's Sarkisian in your mind rank among head coaches in the Big 12? He ain't in the top 3.
No.
But nobody would have put Aranda over him a year ago. And now you might have to call Aranda the best in the Big 12, with all due respect, and my apologies to Mike Gundy, right? I mean, if we're talking about career totality, he's done so much for so long that he might warrant number 1. But, I wonder at the end of next year how we're answering this question. And Steve Sarkisian, the expectations for him upon being hired is not that he's a middle of the pack Big 12 coach. So I don't know. I'm drifting off of our original conversation.
It's interesting. Here's what's an interesting part of that conversation, and maybe we'll have it at some point. There's 3 first-year coaches in the Big 12: Oklahoma State, TCU, Texas Tech. So when you start thinking about where you would rank, I mean, you would think you would have to rank Sarkisian ahead of guys who have been in the Big 12, unless you say to yourself, like, I still think Sonny Dykes is really like what he accomplished, over there. But yeah, it's a fascinating, once you get past, the Arandas, of the world, Gundy, maybe you rank Campbell ahead just based off of what's accomplished. And then you take the other 3 out, he probably is in the top 5. But I'm sure there'd be people who make a case, against him, for sure. But you would think at least top 5, top 5, not top 3, but probably somewhere around that 5 mark.
I don't think that Sarkisian did anything this season to make me think, oh, the team didn't perform, but man, I thought Sark was great. I don't know. Sarkisian still got to prove. Boy, we really have drifted off a little bit here, but that's okay. It's what we do on the Monday Overreaction show. He's got to prove that he's better than average or better than slightly above average. And his career resume up until this point says slightly above average. This year was a below average job. I mean, I can't even think Steve would be upset, or he wouldn't clutch his pearls over the idea of 5-7.
Sure.
Given what his own words were, was registered as a disappointment. So I'm waiting. I wonder when we're going to see Steve Sarkisian as a head coach flex in a way that Aranda did this year. Mm-hmm. I do think that Aranda's season, I think I even made this one of my overreactions a few Mondays ago. No coach in the history of the Big 12 has ever had a better single season coaching job than what Dave Aranda did at Baylor this year. To have been expected to finish last or second. They were last in the non-Kansas conversation. A lot of people thought 8, 9, we can't call them 10 because Kansas will always be 10. But to go, 2-7 a year ago and flip it around and win the Big 12.
Yes.
Win the Big 12. And then to go into a major bowl game, they dominated Ole Miss. I mean, it was boring. I don't want to watch that game again on my DVR, but if a team is a reflection of its coach, they slowly and methodically choked Ole Miss out, and they finished 12-2. They're going to be in the top 10. I think that's the bar that Sarkisian's going to be measured against moving forward, maybe even more so than Venables. I have no real opinion on it other than I'm curious to see how this thing moves forward, because I don't know that there's ever been a Baylor shadow over the universe. Even when Briles was winning, it didn't feel like anybody was comparing coaches directly to Briles per se. Yeah. Nobody would have done that with Mac. Nobody would have done that with Charlie Strong. That wasn't the real comparison that was being made. That it now kind of exists. Maybe the Baylor game is the one next year they have to win. Maybe.
Yeah, so towards the end of the year, though, so I mean that, we'll have to see what they're playing for. But the thing about Aranda that is so amazing, and it's interesting too, because I know Texas fans are pointing to that and saying, yes, that's what we want. But the thing about Aranda and Ketchum year one, some of that lack of success had to do with the COVID situation.
Yeah,
the dude could literally was in front of Zoom as a first year guy, and that's asking a lot to say you don't have practice. You've got nothing but COVID.
Especially for a first year guy. He literally doesn't even know the names of his players.
Correct. And now he's having to look on that screen with, 80 guys or whatever that thing is. Like it's really tough. So what we saw from Aranda this year is like, okay, this is what he looks like when he actually has an entire off season.
I'm telling you, man, what a job. Oh, man.
It's amazing, with an entire off season, like this is what he does. You're like, oh, okay, now we'll see, what he does and how he builds off of that. But yeah, you're right. Because Texas fans have seen, enough coaches come in here and they say to themselves, okay, we should be ahead of that guy, right? That was a conversation we had about when Lincoln Riley got hired. He was an OC, but come on, Stoops was the guy. What will Lincoln really do? Tom Herman, he's established. Look what he did in Houston. Should be ahead of that guy. And we see how great Lincoln Riley ends up being. You kind of tell yourself like, okay, Baylor should be ahead of that program. And you now see them, once again, it's like, damn, another program. Baylor's back up on top again. That becomes the thing with Sarkisian is, while some of us like me, I might say, this will be a rebuilding year. I can see why Texas fans look and say, screw your rebuilding. Bingo. Look at what they did right there.
That's the team slogan in 2022 is Texas fans saying, if Dave Aranda can do what he did at Baylor in year 2, I don't want to hear nothing about 7-5 in
Correct.
Texas with Steve Sarkisian. Because if Aranda could do it, Sarkisian should be able to do it.
With less resources, less elite names, like all of that kind of stuff. Yes, it's the whole thing that this kind of goes back to what you and I always talk about when I was like, how many 5 stars does it take? These are when certain sometimes when coaching matters. Yeah, that becomes the thing where you realize, okay, that guy's just coaching his ass off. Like that's what the hell he's doing. And then you're saying to yourself, all right, well, we got all these guys. We should be better than Kansas. I totally get it from a Texas fan perspective.
Real quick, let's change directions a little bit on our Overreaction Monday. Can we talk NFL for a second? I have a bunch of just wild NFL things I just want to shoot at you.
Hit me.
Number one, the most Dallas Cowboys thing ever was to blow out Washington by like a bazillion points one week, and then the very next week lose at home to an Arizona team that wasn't at full strength. Like, believe me, I will never do as a Cowboys fan what I'm accusing Texas fans of doing with their own team. I'm the opposite. Like I've already settled into, they might win a home wild card game, but that also might be against Arizona. So maybe not. Like I have my expectations properly placed lower, right where they need to be in the dirt. Antonio Brown, man, I want to beat up on the guy for just being outlandish. I do kind of fall on the side of, I hope that guy has some help moving forward. Like I just, I don't know what's wrong with him, but when you don't have this self-awareness to know that going ape shit on the sidelines is a bad idea, like even if he got fired in the middle of the game and you feel like I need to walk off the sidelines and go back to the stadium, maybe not like disrobe yourself in public and like, oh man, something bad really happened. Let me quietly as possible. Like that, he doesn't have that self-awareness thing. I kind of want to yell at Antonio Brown a little bit, but then there's another part of me that's just like, dog, man, maybe that dude needs a hug or definitely some therapy. Jamar Chase, that LSU wide receiving core, when they came to Austin, you will never see anything else like it ever.
Pretty badass. Ever.
In retrospect, did Todd Orlando call a bad play on that 4th and 17 or 3rd and 17? Or did Texas just get beat by all world players that do all world things on? Because I know on 3rd and 17 yesterday, Kansas City wasn't stopping Jamar Chase.
Yeah.
Maybe we need to revisit that Texas LSU game from 2019. Maybe we should all just shrug our shoulders on that one play and say, LSU had really good receivers. What are you going to do?
In hindsight, they were stacked.
They were so stacked. Oh, and Joe Burrow, by the way, he was just a guy when he came to Austin.
Yes.
Yeah. Now he's maybe an NFL MVP.
He's in the conversation for the MVP.
It's wild, man.
Yeah. Another guy, you're like, it was just Joe Burrow guy. And now you got to give Sam Ehlinger some damn props for being able to keep that team in there.
Go toe to toe.
Yeah.
All right. That's it. I had to just get a few things. Oh, and by the way, you guys won't know anything about this, but Anwar and I are in a fantasy league together, and Alex Dunlap and a guy named Bill Biddick, who will be watching this video, I'm sure, they were in the championship game. Greatest fantasy football league championship game I have ever seen in almost 30 years of playing fantasy. The final score is unless there's a statistical correction that we don't know about, 177.04 to 176.97. And ultimately, Alex loses the championship because Green Bay murdered Minnesota so bad that he couldn't get one carry for Aaron Jones or A.J. Dillon in the last 9 minutes of that game. Damn. Props, fellas. I got nothing to say to you guys other than y'all deserve to be where y'all were at. Y'all's teams were great. Sorry.
But all I'll say is my last on all your observations is, let me just add in that Nick Saban just continue. It doesn't matter who is his assistant coach. He just continues to do the damn thing. There's certain things nowadays I just never want to hear about a guy that coached under Urban or coached under Urban.
The coaching tree.
Yeah, I only hear, man. Certain Nick out. I mean, Bill O'Brien is his OC. They're still fine. Steve Sarkisian was his OC. He was fine. Loxley was his OC. He was fine. Like, it doesn't matter. Kiffin was the OC. Is fine. Like, it doesn't matter. It just doesn't matter. Like, these coaches don't build up Bama. It's totally the opposite. Saban just does what he does. I don't know if they'll have enough juice to beat Georgia, but I just look at it and I always think about the conversations where Saban loses a guy and everyone's like, oh, you lost coaches. And by the way, Saban's the guy, Ketch, that defeats the whole narrative. Like, well, this team was not successful because they have a whole new staff. Don't they have a whole new staff every year at Bama?
He's never tripping. Like,
never.
As long as he has vessels. It just feels like he just needs somebody to take a few little things off of his plate, like calling plays on offense. Just somebody who's a living body. And, he pretty much will make it work. It's not pretty much. Bill O'Brien's going to get a head coaching job again.
Yes.
Because he's the offensive coordinator at Alabama, and people are going to act like that meant something.
It really are. And it's like, does it? I don't know. Like, because I'm still waiting for the guy to leave where the program can't recover. So
not even players have been able to do that. It's not like he's lost a player. And real quick, last thought. I gave Michigan the benefit of the doubt and thought they would beat Georgia. Shame on me. Shame on me.
Bad call.
It's like for someone who claims to lean on historical data, it's like I forgot, it's the SEC playing the Big Ten.
Correct.
I forgot. And I don't know how I forgot, but I forgot. And that game was 5 minutes old. And it was like, oh. It's going to be like this, huh?
Yeah.
Hey, kudos to Cincinnati for hanging in against Alabama really and truly better than Michigan did against Georgia.
I would totally agree with that. I mean, that was, I was impressed. I was impressed that they were able to hang around that long.
There was never a moment where I thought to myself, Cincinnati could win this game. But I sure as shit didn't think that about Michigan and Georgia either. Like at the end of the first quarter, I was like, look at Cincinnati kind of hanging in there. At the end of the first quarter of Georgia and Michigan, I was like, might be time to go to Netflix. Anyway, real quick, before we go, let me give one last shout out to our guys over at therogueshop.com. One more time. If you're having pain, anxiety, mild depression, having trouble sleeping, this is the week to take advantage of 30% off the Delta 8 100 milligram gummies. Trust us, we know they really do work. Type in Orange Bloods into the discount code for 10% off the already 20% off price that comes with the gummies. Trust me, it's the gift that will best Christmas gift you might give yourself belatedly in 2022. For myself and Anwar Richardson, you got anything else?
No, man. Let me tell you, those gummies. Let me just reiterate. It's so good, and this is why it's, you know what this stuff really helps for, whether it's pain or anything to that effect. I learned a long time ago. Everything on like your irritation scale, your anger scale, always starts at like where do you start? What's your starting point on 1 to 10, right? So if you're at a 6, already irritated, then it doesn't take much for you to get down to like an 8 or a 9 or 10 or something like that. If you have some products that have you relax, getting a good night of sleep, being able to relax throughout the day, you start off your days at a 0 or a 1. When people start getting on your nerves, whether it's at work, kids, what life, car.
Me.
Yeah.
How do you think Anwar is able to even do this show every day?
Especially if he understood why I didn't want to do the show today. So yes. You're just like you're at like you go from a 0-1 to a 3 and life goes on. Just some psychology plug for you.
One more PSA related to the gummies. Don't take too many at once. Mm-mm. Don't think to yourself, oh, I'm a fat guy. I can take more because I got more weight. It will knock you on your ass if you get a little too crazy with the gummies. Just FYI. It'll help you sleep. That's
Yeah.
for sure.
Help you sleep until Wednesday, though, if you take too many of them. So be careful.
For myself and Anwar Richardson, you guys be good to each other. We'll talk to you tomorrow. Later.